Turn to M3 and Karen B for this week's episode of Comply on the Fly. You'll get quick and timely answers to the most common compliance questions so you and your business can keep moving ahead. Please note this podcast and the contents herein do not constitute legal advice. Please seek the advice of counsel for any benefit compliance related implementation guidance or strategy.
Hello everyone, I'm Karen B, and the Comply on the Fly question of the week is, what is the current situation regarding all of these vaccine mandates? Great question. Let's start with a rundown of the different mandates. First, the CMS, or Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services Vaccination Mandate for most healthcare workers. Second, the Federal Employee Vaccination Mandate. Third, the Federal Contractor or Subcontractor Vaccination Mandate. And finally, the OSHA ETS, or Emergency Temporary Standard, requiring vaccination or testing and masking for employees of private employers with 100 or more employees. As of today, 3 out of the 4 have been challenged in the courts. Can you guess which one hasn't? If you guessed the Federal Employee Mandate, you would be correct. The rest have been challenged, so let's take a look at the current status, which seems to change daily. First, the CMS mandate. Where did that come from? Well, it came from the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services when they issued an emergency interim rule on November 4th. That rule required the vaccination of healthcare workers for entities that receive Medicare funding. Claiming federal overreach, 10 states brought suit against the federal government for this mandate in the Eastern District of Missouri. On November 29th, the district judge issued a preliminary injunction for those states. 12 other states followed, filing suit shortly thereafter. The argument is that this type of enforcement or requirement should be left up to the states. On December 2nd, 2021, CMS issued a statement that it has suspended implementation and enforcement of the rule pending additional litigation. Second, the Federal Contractor or Subcontractor Mandate. This mandate requires that entities that contract with the federal government have a vaccination requirement, and that vaccination requirement should be implemented by January 18th of 2022. On November 30th, a federal judge in Kentucky blocked the federal government from enforcing this requirement in the form of a preliminary injunction in 3 states, stating that the Biden administration had exceeded its authority. The injunction was applicable in 3 states, Kentucky, Ohio, and Tennessee. But of course, other states and other jurisdictions filed suit. On December 7th of 2021, a federal judge in Georgia halted the implementation and enforcement of this vaccination requirement for federal contractors nationwide. So as it stands right now with the Federal Contractor Subcontractor Vaccination Mandate, it is on hold in all 50 states. Finally, the OSHA ETS, or Emergency Temporary Standard for private employers. This continues to be battled in the courts after an initial stay was issued and confirmed in early November. After issuing the order to stay, OSHA suspended all activities related to the implementation and enforcement of the standard, and the battle continues. Suits were filed all across the country and have now been consolidated to be heard by the 6th Circuit. Of course, there's opposition to the 6th Circuit hearing this case. Several union groups have requested that the case be relocated to the DC Circuit, and the government is opposing the fact that this case will be heard en banc, which means that it will be heard by all 16 of the current judges in the 6th District. The federal government would rather have a 3-judge panel hear this case. So the bottom line is that the vaccine mandates, except for the Federal Employee Mandate, all remain in flux. If you choose to implement a vaccination mandate at this time, it will be so under your own policy and technically not required by the government. So stay tuned. This is an ever-changing subject, and we will keep you posted not only in future Comply on the Fly episodes, but also at m3ins.com. And that is your Comply on the Fly question of the week. Thanks for tuning in.
What's on your mind? If you have a pressing compliance question, send it to askkarenb at m3ins.com. We'll do our best to cover it in an upcoming episode. You can now follow and subscribe to Comply on the Fly on Spotify and Google Podcasts. Make sure to tune in next week and encourage others to join us.